All right, I want to welcome everybody to a regularly scheduled city council meeting. The mayor is ill, so I'll be running the meeting tonight. We're going to start off with a couple of proclamations, and I'm going to come around to the front for those. And we'll start with the pledge, and we'll have Officer Hinton lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, is this thing on?
Yep.
We're going to start with the proclamation to recognize Brandy Stanley and Sarah Nelson, the dispatchers. Yes, please, come on up. Whereas Waterville Public Safety dispatchers Brandy Stanley and Sarah Nelson were on duty when Officer Hinton stopped a suspected shoplifter on Main Street in Waterville and was subsequently wounded, and whereas dispatchers Stanley and Nelson, working as a team, coordinated a multi-agency response that included directing police, fire, and EMS responders to appropriate locations along the high-speed pursuit route to intercept the armed suspect and provide medical treatment to Officer Hinton. And whereas dispatchers Sarah Nelson and Brandy Stanley utilized all resources within the communication center to direct and manage this dangerous pursuit, this included emergency and non-emergency telephone lines, wireless communications, radios, and computer data terminals to provide pertinent information to keep emergency responders informed of the ongoing pursuit and to help ensure their safety. And whereas during the high-speed pursuit, dispatchers Stanley and Nelson continued to handle routine and emergency calls for service from the general public and dispatched reserve, police, fire, and EMS units where needed. And whereas it is with great appreciation that we acknowledge the actions of dispatchers Brandy Stanley and Sarah Nelson for their outstanding teamwork to provide the necessary resources for first responders to apprehend the armed suspect and provide life-saving medical treatment to Officer Tim Hinton. Their actions demonstrated their willingness to go above and beyond the call of duty to ensure the safety of all who entrust them with the responsibility of being public safety dispatcher. Now, therefore, I, Eric Thomas, not Nick Iskro, Mayor of the City of Waterville, Maine, on behalf of the City Council, wish to call on all of our citizens to recognize the excellent work performed by dispatchers Brandy Stanley and Sarah Nelson.
Let me introduce them. This is Sarah Nelson, so you know which one was, and Brandy Stanley. And they did a tremendous job that night. They have a very challenging and stressful job. They worked as a team, and they provided the necessary resources that enabled this particular incident to end as well as it did. So great credit to them. Thank you both.
And if we could have Officer Hinton come on up. Whereas Waterville Police Officer Timothy Hinton was called to the scene of a shoplifting complaint on December 22nd, 2019, and whereas the defendant fled the scene and was pursued by Officer Hinton, and whereas the defendant repeatedly slowed, stopped, and shot at Officer Hinton, striking him in the arm, and whereas the defendant once again sped off at high speeds and Officer Hinton decided to continue, And whereas the defendant stopped his vehicle a short time later in order to ambush Officer Hinton and wounded him a second time, and whereas Officer Hinton continued his pursuit until such time as he was ordered to stop, now therefore, on behalf of Mayor Nick Iskro, I have the special pleasure of recognizing your heroic actions in the course of performing your duties as a Waterville police officer. We are united in saying how much we admire and respect your determination in completing your assignment at great risk to your personal safety.
I have another award that I'd like to present to Tim. As you know, there are many commonalities that exist between law enforcement agencies, and two of the most common is that we take an oath and we wear a uniform. We take an oath to uphold the state and federal constitution, and we wear our uniform as a visible commitment to law and order and to protect and serve those that entrust us to wear those uniforms. No one has demonstrated these long-established and time-honored practices more than Tim Hinton did when he was severely wounded in a gunfight with an armed and dangerous suspect on December 22nd, 2019. On that day, Tim held true to his oath to protect and serve, and he wore his uniform with distinction, pride, honor, and with great valor. Survival for Tim that day went beyond training and skills, but it took the moral courage to stay in the fight, even at the risk of fatal consequences. So with that, it is an honor to present Tim with the department's Medal of Valor. These Valor bars can be worn proudly on his shirt, his uniform shirt, as an example for all of us to follow, all law enforcement officers to follow when they face life and death situations like Tim did. So Tim, it's a great honor, pleasure. I award you these two pins.
I think it's a great reminder of the fantastic people that we have working for the city of Waterville in the police department, as well as in the many other departments of the city. Sometimes being a public employee can be a thankless job, but we certainly appreciate all the hard work that the police department does along with all the other employees for the city. All right, moving on. I think we're not ready for the Spirit of America Award tonight, so we're moving on to the disclosure of conflict of interest. Is there anyone who has a conflict with any of the items on the agenda tonight? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All right. Moving on to unfinished business, Order 36-2020.
Motion to read by title only.
And second.
All those in favor?
An order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Can I get a
Move to
motion?
adopt.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Patty, can you read the roll?
Counsel Morris,
Yes.
Counsel Oliveira,
Yes.
Counsel Mayu,
Yes.
Counsel Foss,
Yes.
Counsel Frankie,
Yes.
Counsel Thomas.
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
And moving on to Order 37-2020.
Motion to read by title only.
And second.
All those in favor?
An order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Move to adopt.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Patty?
Counselor Morris?
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira?
Yes.
Counselor Mayu?
Yes.
Counselor Foss?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor Thomas?
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
And ordinance 38-2020.
Motion to read by title only.
Second.
All those in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to zoning.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion on this item? All right. Any discussion from the public on this item? Nope.
Okay. Counselor Morris?
Yes.
Counselor Oliveira?
Yes.
Counselor Mayu?
Yes.
Counselor Foss?
Yes.
Counselor Frankie?
Yes.
Counselor Thomas?
Yes.
The vote is 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
All right, on to new business. Resolution 41-2020.
A resolution providing for airport hangar lease. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council acting as municipal officers that the city-owned hangar on the north end of the airfield be leased to Riverside Aircraft Corporation according to the attached lease document.
Move to adopt.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Thank you.
And resolution 42-2020.
A resolution providing for appointment of a parking committee. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council acting as the municipal officers that a parking committee be appointed to replace the existing committee. Attached is a copy of the original purpose statement of the committee with a listing of members. Existing members who have indicated a willingness to continue are John Fortier, Charles Gigier, Cindy Jacobs, Al Hodgson, Kevin Joseph. Councilors who have expressed an interest, Sidney Mayhew and Flavia Oliveira. Others who have expressed an interest, Pam Merrill.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. I have 3 additional names to add for your consideration. 2 people that have approached me that said they would like to continue. Brian Clark, who was part of the original committee. Ken Vlodek, part of the original committee. And Councilor Frankie also had indicated an interest.
I think Linda wants to be on the parking committee as well.
I had been asked to be on it by the mayor.
And what was your name again? I'm sorry, Linda?
Linda Warner.
Thank you.
So can I get an amendment to add those names?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment? And move the order, the resolution as amended.
So moved.
And the second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, resolution 43-2020.
An order providing for replacement police vehicle. Be it hereby ordered by the Waterville City Council acting as the municipal officers that the Waterville Police Department be allowed to replace a police vehicle that was deemed a total loss after being struck with multiple rounds of gunfire in December 2019, and that the Waterville City Council, acting in its capacity as the municipal officers, authorizes the police department to spend up to $47,000 for the purchase of a new replacement vehicle and equipment. Said funds to come from the insurance settlement, $22,200, and the undesignated fund balance, $25,000. Be it further ordered that the bidding process as required by the City of Waterville's purchasing ordinance be waived as provided in Article 5, Section C, which states when it is provided with factual data submitted by the administration that the matter under consideration is unique or non-competitive.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? Chief, did you want to say something?
The reason I asked for the waiver of the bid process is that we have 2 new cruisers on order right now, and we ordered them in July, and we have no delivery date as of yet. The Darlings Auto Group that received the bid back in July when the budget was passed said that they would help us look at least through the New England states to see if there was a leftover someplace, and that if we could find one, we'd be able to purchase it immediately. So I got 2 aging cruisers that are several months older or than we anticipated having, and if we're not able to find a cruiser out there someplace, it means we'll have to order another one, and that will be, I don't know how long, but this has been seven months now since we ordered those cruisers. Thank you.
Claude, did you have a question?
So does that mean that there's actually a vehicle that we can? Is this about an actual vehicle then?
Yes.
So as soon as we authorize this, he can drive it away?
No, he hasn't lived.
Okay, okay.
You haven't located one yet, though.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
I bet that's what he was. I bet, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Any comments from the public? All right, all in favor?
Good, thank you.
Moving on to Resolution 44-2020.
An order providing for approval of a municipal state agreement, Trafton Road. Be it hereby ordered by the Waterville City Council, acting as the municipal officers, that the attached MDOT municipal state agreement be approved regarding reconstruction of the Trafton Road, and that the city manager be authorized to make payments to Maine DOT in the amount of $500,000.
Move to adopt.
Second.
As you can read in the summary of this order, this first started in 2014, so we're almost 6 years to the point now where it looks like Trafton Road really will be rebuilt. It was part of the, for those of you that weren't on the council at the time, it was part of the original deal that if DOT and the federal government and private development out there would pay for the intersection, the city would agree to contribute some towards the rebuilding of the Trafton Road. That's the $500,000 amount. The total amount estimated for the Trafton Road reconstruction is $4.3 million. So it's a lot of money. And certainly it's a very, very good thing for us to be able to get that done because it's got more traffic now than it had before. It's certainly higher, bigger, heavier vehicles too. So this is something that's desperately needed.
Mike, ultimately, the city's share will be paid from TIF funds from the TIF district that we established out on Trafton Road?
Right. Ultimately, we hope to be able to collect enough from that TIF district to pay the debt service on this $500,000. So that item, that $500,000 item, would be one of the bond issue items that you'll be talking about in a few short weeks when we talk about the bonding that we had talked about for next September, this being the number one item. We'll bond for it, and it can be over a period of at least 20 years, given the lifetime of the road. And as those debt service come due, hopefully we'll have money coming in from the TIF district out there that we can apply to this.
Point of clarification, Mike, you're expecting that road, once they complete it, to last 20 years? Is that?
Yeah.
We live in Maine.
That's a fair question. Well, it's going to be reconstructed, so it won't just be a skinny mix on top of the existing pavement. They're going to grind it down to gravel, use that material they grind up to put a new sub-base,
Okay.
and on top of that sub-base will come the pavement. So, yeah, maybe 20 is a little bit of an exaggeration, but I think it's safe to say 15 to 20.
But it'll need maintenance, but it won't, likely would not need a complete rebuild.
No.
So the way I understand what you just said is they're going to take it down past what tar is there, into the gravel pad that's underneath. a
That's
little
my understanding.
Okay.
Yep, of what the road, what the construction work involves.
bit.
I was not here when this was originally passed, and I'm just starting to learn how the finances of the city work. It looks to me like we're writing a check for $500,000 right now, but we're going to borrow the money for it next fall? Is that-
Right?
And then we're going to pay for what we borrow?
Oh, we're not writing the check now.
Oh, we're not writing a check now.
No, the first payment will be due in September, and I believe the second and final one is December. It should be in that attachment to the item on the agenda. The very last page, I think, shows the payment schedule. I think I'm right with the September 30 date on the very last page.
In the back.
Back?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the second payment due date? Is it?
12/31.
12/31.
Yeah, December.
12/31.
It is December, okay, yep. So we may not actually have the money in hand in September, Councilor Frankie, but soon after we will.
Assuming that the bond passes.
Yeah, well, you determine the bond,
Yeah.
right, and the amount, of course, right.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the alternative, we did commit ourselves to this 6 years ago. And so the alternative, if, for example, the bond did not pass, would be that we'd have to foot the money out of the general fund, and then we'd eventually reimburse ourselves if and when the TIF district starts generating
Enough.
income.
Any other questions?
Anything from the public? All right, all those in favor? Moving on to Resolution 45-2020.
Motion to read by title only.
Second.
All those in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a pole permit to Consolidated Incorporated and Central Maine Power Company on 8 Rod Road.
Motion to adopt, sorry.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? All right, moving on to councilor updates. Do any of the city councilors have an update?
Not so much an update, I have a question for Mike. We are passing money for Crafton Road. Have we thought about Webb Road at all? I need four-wheel drive to get through it now. So, and it's in worse shape from 8 Rod down to West River. It's in worse shape than Crafton, in my opinion. Have we started thinking about that?
I'm sure it's in the schedule for when it's going to be done, but I can't tell you what year that is, but I'll certainly get back to the full council
Okay.
on when Webb Road is in the mix to have attention. It needs it, you're right.
It was my understanding that that is a city issue, not a DOT issue. Am I correct in saying that?
I believe you are. It was,
We swapped it for Trafton Road, didn't we?
thank you,
It was a swamp.
right. So we gave up, the DOT assumed control of Trafton Road, and we then took ownership of Webb Road. Used to be the other way around, where we had Trafton, they had Webb. We switched, I think much to our benefit, because they're putting in 4.3 million minus 500,000 into Trafton. Webb Road won't take anything more, won't take anything like that, but it does need to be fixed.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to explain that, there are a lot of roads, especially main roads that run through the city that are what are called state aid roads. So while we're responsible for the upkeep, year-to-year maintenance of the road, the state is actually responsible if it gets to the point where the road needs to be rebuilt. And unfortunately, over the years, lots of places have fallen victim to the state budget and not having the money to fix up the roads. And over the years, what they've done, they actually developed a plan where if the city would pay half, you could move yourself up to the top of that list, even though technically the state was responsible for the entire cost. And so that's an example of how the state has shifted some of these costs to municipalities. Waterville has been pretty active about taking advantage of that because we can't have a road where you need to take a 4x4 to get through. So in a lot of cases, we've stepped up, to pay the half to move it up the list. But in this case, Webb Road used to be a state aid road. It is no longer a state aid road because we traded it for Trafton Road. So now that's our responsibility.
We could just trade it back. Just think it out loud here.
Once it's fixed.
After it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of those roads that are state roads. A good example is Eustis Parkway. I think most people would consider that a local road, but it's in fact a state road. And the only way, and that was bad, I don't know if those of you who are on the council, Councilor Mayu may remember that, on Eustis Parkway, we did that 7 or 8 years ago. And we did it through the program that Councilor Thomas mentioned, half and half share.
Yeah.
Even though state road, the city decided that time, we can't wait for the state to come forward. How long into the future, we don't know. We'll give half, they give half, it gets fixed. And there's been 8 or 9 of those roads that we've done that to.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, I think that program grew out of an agreement we made years ago with Colby College in the state when we gave up control of Mayflower Hill to Colby, and then there was a deal to do Washington Street, was it?
Lincoln.
Lincoln.
And Pleasant Streets were both done. So the MPI program, the Municipal Partnership Initiative, which is a state municipal thing, started. The first MPI projects were in Waterville, and they had to do with the Mayflower Hill Drive section. And in return for us doing that, the state came in and did Pleasant Street and Lincoln Street. Lincoln was bad at that time, too. So, yeah, we've taken full advantage of that.
I wouldn't necessarily call it advantage, since we're paying something for something we shouldn't have to pay for, but we have to fix the roads, so.
Yeah. It doesn't do much good when people call to complain. You say, oh, it's not our problem, it's the state's problem, why don't you call them? Right. That's no way to...
No.
Exactly. We want to hear it.
Any other counselor updates? Moving on to community notes. Do we have anybody for community notes?
If I may,
Go ahead,
Counselor.
Patty.
I would just remind members of the public that we have a March 3rd presidential primary election and also a statewide referendum election. This March 3rd, we'll be voting at the Elm, formerly known as the American Legion Building. So that's a new location for this election only. Absentee ballots are available now at City Hall. You can either call or come in. Thank you.
And that reminds me, before you speak, the police department is working with the Elm to put on a fundraiser for Operation Hope that will be held March 21st. For more info, you can go to the Elm's website or to the Waterville Police Department website. It's a great partnership going on, and hopefully they can raise lots of money for that program because it's been pretty successful. Elizabeth?
I voted today. Thank you very much. I'm Elizabeth Leonard. I represent the Maine Poor People's Campaign, and I know many of you are probably getting tired of seeing me here, but I'm going to keep coming back, let you know about this campaign. But I also wanted to invite you to a number of events that are going to be happening in the Waterville area in the next month or so, starting tomorrow. We are showing the new documentary about the Poor People's Campaign, the new Poor People's Campaign, which builds on the work of Martin Luther King in the late 1960s. The film is called We Cried Power, and it is about 45 minutes long. We'll be showing it at the public library. It's free. We'll have refreshments and discussion afterwards, and I might even bring my guitar and sing. We can sing together if you like, but anyway, the film is really great. We're going to be showing it again at the Unitarian Church on February 23rd, next Sunday at 11:30 in the morning, and at the Pleasant Street Methodist Church on March 8th, and then down in our sister city down there in the Capitol in Augusta at the Lithgow Library in early March as well. You can always go to our Facebook page, Maine Poor People's Campaign's Facebook page, or now the national website, and look for what's going on in Maine. And if you have any questions, I have a little one-page sheet that talks about the Poor People's Campaign and directs you where to go if you want to learn more about us. So we're an anti-poverty movement, and we are looking for more people to join us.
Riaan Finch, Ward 6. So I think maybe about a year ago, I had mentioned that Friends of Green Street Park and Senna had received a NeighborWorks grant. That's a federal grant for $4,000 to do an improvement at Green Street Park. And so over the past year, we've held community meetings, we've taken surveys, we've pretty much talked to everyone around the park and people in the neighborhood. We narrowed things down to 4 choices, and that was signage and seating, a children's play theater, some form of art in the park, or a born learning trail. We couldn't do everything with the $4 grand. So the community really stepped up. The United Way of Mid-Maine Rising Leaders held 2 fundraisers to fund a born learning trail. And through a grant from CGI, we are partnering with Waterville Creates to bring a summer art in the park program for kids. And signage came in a lot lower than expected. So we were able to, with that $4 grand, we were able to get signage for both the top of Sherwin Hill and then the bottom entrance into Green Street Park. And we will be building a children's theater at the South End Festival in August. We had these giant plywood 5x5 murals that the kids could paint, and those are going to make the sides of this children's theater. And we're hopeful that we can get it in around September, but knowing how things work, it's probably far more likely that we'll be having next year. We'll be doing the ribbon cutting on that. But we started with a $4,000 grant, and then with our community partners and private donors, we have a private donor who's interested in funding a bench. We're going to put in almost double the amount of money into Green Street Park this year. And so I'd like to thank the United Way of Mid-Maine, CGI, and Waterville Creates, and Parks and Rec, particularly Matt Scahan, who has been absolutely just amazing and incredible to work with. Friends of Green Street Park first sat down with him 4 years ago, and he was immediately all in with what we were trying to do. He's been supportive 100% of the way, and we really probably couldn't do a lot of the things that have happened in the park if it hadn't been for the investment that Parks and Rec has also put in. And so there's a lot of stuff happening at Green Street Park. We are also on the 29th, next Saturday, we are holding our annual Winterfest from 11 to 1. We'll have snowshoes and sleds and hot dogs and cider. And Representative White has, with Inland Hospital, donated free hats for the kids, and we also have free scarves for the kids as well. So that's 11 to 1 on Saturday, the 29th. Thanks.
Kathy Weeks, Ward 1. First, Chief Massie, it was great to see your team there tonight. What you do for this community and the things that you face every day. So thank you for that. 2 things. I know at the last meeting, the discussion kind of ended abruptly, but I know many of us want to know what conclusion we're coming to regarding the Yard Goods Center and parking for the students. I know we've been talking about this for now years, and it's embarrassing that we don't have a resolution for a store that has been in the community almost 72 years. I can assure you, if Mr. Vodick was still here, which I'm sure most of you don't even know who he was, but Ken's dad, we wouldn't have prolonged this for so many years. It's a disgrace. So can we have an update where we are with that for these students?
I have that under my manager's report,
Okay.
so we're going to get to that in just a minute. And I know Mr. Vlodek wants to speak on that, too.
Well,
Yep.
I'm talking about Mr. Vodick. You knew him, Mike.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
A fine, fine man.
Yes, yes.
The other thing that many of my residents have been asking about the plan for the national search for the city manager.
That's on my list, too.
Hey, I've just stole your thunder tonight, you know? So, in that, thank you very much.
Anyone else for community notes before we move on to the manager's report? All right.
All right. February 14th was the foreclosure date, so unfortunately, on Friday, last Friday, we foreclosed on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parcels or properties. 2 of the 6 are vacant pieces of land, not improved, vacant land. 2 are buildings that are inhabited, and the remaining 2 are vacant buildings. So 4 buildings, 2 vacant pieces of property. Under the city's ordinance, they have 30 days from last Friday, Linda, Cody, or?
Today.
From today? When we sent out the notice letting them know about the 30 days. Yep. So there is that grace period. The key, or the catch, with a grace period is that when you come in within 30 days to redeem your property, you must pay all of the outstanding taxes. So it's probably 2.5 years' worth of taxes that need to be paid. We have hope that out of those 4 buildings, probably 2 or 3, Mrs. Cody is our tax collector, 3, will have someone come in to square up before the end of the 30 days. We certainly don't want to be in this situation. We don't want to own property, especially we don't want to own buildings with people living in it. So we're very hopeful that out of those 4, 3 will be paid, 1 may remain. And then there's one final one that you made a note of that we need to pick up again on the foreclosure process. So there'll be another 30 days on this property, which is not part of the 6 that I mentioned. So there will be 7 at one point. So unless you have any questions, and I again thank Linda Cody because she does an outstanding job in outreach, getting in her car, going to the houses, seeing if anyone lives there. If they do, who can I talk to? Tracking people down, tracking the mortgage holders down, which is not always easy in finding out how many times a piece of property has been transferred over time. So thank you, Linda, and we'll keep you abreast of where that ends up. Any questions on that at all? I want to report to you we have meetings, committee meetings coming up. The first one is this Thursday. The Solid Waste Committee is meeting Thursday afternoon at 4. The Head of Falls Committee, a smaller committee of the big Head of Falls Committee, our core committee has been meeting over the last few weeks to continue working with the developer. There's still nothing concrete to report at this time to you, but it won't be long before we will be coming back to you with some news about Head of Falls and what may happen there development-wise. The third committee met today, and that's the search committee for the position that I hold. And that committee this afternoon talked about a schedule, timetable, talked about the outreach, the search for a new manager. And I think the only decision made today, Councilor Frankie was there, Councilor Morris, the mayor was there. The only decision made today was to interview one of the companies that's proposed to assist the city with the hiring process. We got 2 proposals, and we're going to interview, I think in 2 weeks, a firm that will explain how it is they go about the whole process. So we'll be reporting more on that. Any questions on that?
Is that on track for having things, having a person in that seat?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
No question.
Okay.
It's on track.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Budget, speaking about being on track, you know, the preparation of the budget usually takes all of January, almost all of February. I think my due date to give something to you is March 20. We're going to meet that by 2 or 3 weeks. I hope to have the budget done, well, if not the end of this week, early next week. And so we'll start reviewing that in a preliminary way. We still have to get the school side into the whole picture. But that schedule is looking very good, and certainly we'll keep you up to date on where the budget preparation is. But that really starts in earnest, as far as you're concerned, late March, all through April, May, and finally in June. Finally on my list was a discussion about the map that you see behind you. So we've had many discussions in-house, and I want to thank Councilor Thomas for his outreach work in talking to people. I know that Councilor Thomas has gone over to talk to some of the people at the Yard Goods Center. In addition, the chief and I met with people at the Inland. Hopefully my thing here works if I get the right button. But I think everyone knows where the Inland, there it is, basically in that part of the building. Their concern was lack of all-day parking, because right now, the all-day parking, you know, is this, whatever color you want to call it, salmon color. And so we found with the results of the surveys that the parking enforcement person has been doing for over a month now. Yeah, well over a month. Started in early January. He's been counting vacant spaces in most of these sections. And what we found was, out of all the sections, this section E was the one that had the most vacant spaces. That's 2-hour parking. So we have proposed and actually started the process of transferring these spaces here to all day. That way the folks that work here, and maybe even some of the yard good customers, could take advantage of the all-day parking in this strip. And I know the other thing that Councilor Thomas talked about with the folks at the Yard Goods Center is converting these spaces along these lines. I'm sorry about the jittery thing.
How much
It's really,
coffee did you have this morning?
it's not me. It is not me. I challenge anyone to come up here and hold this thing steady. But anyway, I guess we feel that could be a help too in making those all day. I had a conversation with Ken Flodex afternoon. I know that he probably feels a little differently about that. So that's what we are proposing to do. It may not be the final solution. We think it's a temporary one, short-term one, that can only help. Eric, did you want to add?
The other thing that we decided to do was to make it so that you cannot park overnight in that section of the parking lot, and hopefully that'll keep those spaces from just being eaten up by the Colby students. So from midnight to 6 a.m., you would not be able to be parked in that part of the concourse.
Section B
Just section B.
and A.
Well, that's 2-hour parking.
That's right.
So, and we met with Brian Clark from Colby College this morning. We're going to update this map and then post it in the lobby here at the dorm so that the kids are aware of, you know, the fact that they cannot park there overnight. It really honestly is only an issue from talking to the people at Yard Goods 2 days a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. I think our hope is that by the time the Colby kids would have gotten up and gone up to class and come back downtown, the yard goods people would have had a chance to get parked into those all-day parking spaces. And, then they'd be able to be parked there all day long, or as long as it needs to do what they're doing at the yard goods center. And this isn't meant to be, it's meant to be sort of a stopgap measure until the parking committee can get up and get going and take a more holistic look at the whole parking issue. But this was a way to address the problem without doing something like 3-hour parking or giving special treatment to just one business.
Want to use my pointer?
I do have a handout, though.
I'll pass it off for you, Ken.
Yeah, I already gave one to Sid.
Oh, okay. You
And,
got one?
I should keep one. At our last parking committee meeting, we brought up the fact that we really didn't have a clear idea of how many students are parking downtown. And it's something we've discussed for the last year or so. So what I mentioned is what I would do, and I had a hard time finding the time, but when I found out about what was happening here, I found Monday night to be a time that I could do it. To take account of student parking at 4 a.m. in the morning. So I know that these are all Colby students, nobody else. They're doing a much better job on the Appleton Street lot. In the parking committee, we were a bit disappointed that that lot was only being used by about half. There might have been 20, 25 cars. So undoubtedly, Colby's put a little pressure on the students that have permits there, so that was pretty well filled. Another positive aspect is we have some students using Hedda Falls to park overnight, which is great. Little parking by the dorm just outside here, there were 5. But the areas that are problematic is the area fronting inland, which is the all-day parking, which I have a hard time seeing. It's 46, whatever the D is in front of there. That was pretty much filled with 36 cars parking overnight. In front of our area, there were 14 cars, which is quite a few. And then that little area, which is A, that was pretty much, I think there's 6 spots there, 5 of them were taken. My concern is what I see on Saturdays. We have Monday through Friday rules, and what happens on Saturday is the students that are parking in front of Inland decide to park closer to the dorm. So on Saturdays in B, before we open at 9:30 in the morning, half of that lot is filled with Colby cars. So if we take that lot area there and move that into all-day parking, basically what's going to happen is those will be taken by Colby students. There won't be any place for employees or for customers to park. The area in E, I'm not sure, that's not in front of my store, so that's going to affect the businesses there. It'll affect Key Bank, so I'm not sure exactly what will happen there. I guess I can speak for pretty much everybody on the parking committee. It's been a disappointing 2 years. We thought we'd come up with a solution, and it just seems to escape us continually. But what's the big concern is there's 127, students that are parking downtown. The concourse was never designed to be a dormitory parking lot. It was designed to be for customers. And it's getting to be a real problem. And I'm hearing more and more stories of consumers getting tickets that are rather upset. An example, without saying which restaurant it is a lady from Bangor came down to meet 2 friends at a restaurant for lunch to catch up. And like anything, you're going to have lunch, and then you're going to have some drinks afterwards, and you're going to, catch up on, what your life has been at. When she came out, it was over 2 hours, and she had a ticket on her car. And basically, I guess she sent a note to Mike of, this is the last time I will ever come to downtown Waterville. So what I don't want to see happen is our ticketing to target consumers. It's hard enough being in a retail business today. When we're scaring people away, that makes it really difficult. We've discussed in the committee the idea of going 3 hours. That will help a bit.
Cindy Jacobs has an idea which would eliminate all nighttime parking in the concourse, which would keep the Colby students out of the concourse. The original agreement, as much as in the last meeting we were told that no such thing was ever said, but enough people have basically repeated it that I'm sure it was said, that Colby students would park in the Appleton Street lot. The balance that didn't have the 50 permits would park at Colby and would be shuttled back and forth with the 2 shuttles. That story now is basically, no, we never said that. So at least in B, it would be very problematic for our business and for the other businesses in that section of the concourse to pull that into all-day parking, because it's just going to be taken by Colby students.
I mean, it's really discussion for the parking committee once that gets up and running again. But I think that's why we want to try not making it so that you cannot park overnight in Section B. And hopefully that'll keep because I'm guessing what probably happens is the Colby kids, Friday night, they're like, all right, we have use of that all weekend long. Because, you know, Friday night they think they can park there. They're fine all weekend long because there's no parking enforcement on the weekends. And so Saturday morning, they're all parked there. But if we make it so that you cannot park overnight in that section, hopefully we're really honestly trying to force them to park in E, because those businesses, I think, have the least amount of traffic. And it seems like that's the most underutilized part of the parking lot. But so that was the thought behind it. And we're going to try it and see if it works. I gave my cell phone number to Linda and Joyce to call me. Keep me updated on how things are going. And again, once the parking committee gets up and going, then hopefully they can monitor these things and come up with some real long-term solutions.
Would you consider adding Section A to the overnight parking situation since the library is open Saturday?
I don't see why. I mean, we certainly could have that discussion. I don't think it would be that much more difficult to enforce it, but we'd have to let the chief and Mike have their input on that before I say yay or nay.
The library's open.
Makes sense. Chief, we do now have, do you have in play now the Saturday enforcement? Have we gone ahead and done that?
Yeah.
So if the problem that we're talking about that materializes like a Friday night and Colby students decide, to leave their cars in that section overnight, and obviously we have it posted by some form or by some nature, that will be enforced.
Right, on Saturday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 2 hours.
Yeah. So there is, so that's a mechanism on Saturday that would actually still be enforced since we have expanded. And this was discussed at the parking committee that I was at. And we encouraged, the chief to, if we can, making revenue through the parking enforcement and having a parking attendant, because it's really paying for itself, because the enforcement is being effective, as we can see. Many people have been telling me it is putting bite back into the city and enforcing some of these things, and having it expanded to Saturday, I think is going to help with this overall process as well.
I'd just like to add that I've talked to a couple of folks in the community about this, and though this is, lack of better terms, a Band-Aid for the solution, I would implore the parking committee to convene as quickly as possible and look at this situation and come up with a good working, obviously there are two different sides of this right now already. Let's do something about this and see what we can come up with, and it's something that works for everybody.
I'm going to let Kathy go ahead and speak, and then I don't want this to turn into a parking committee meeting, so we'll let Kathy speak, and then we'll probably move to adjourn the meeting.
I just had 2 questions. Why are we allowing Colby students to park here when, as Ken just said, this parking lot was not for dorm parking to start with? That has been the problem all along. And my second thing is in Section B, instead of putting the knitting students as close to the road as possible, at least until this great decision is made, why can't the students park like where your letter B is? And that way it would just be just across from the store entrance, especially with winter the way it has been. I mean, you're 92 years old.
I understand. I mean, we also have to balance the needs of the other businesses in that area, you know, and people going to the Villager need to be able to get in and out of there. And so it's hard to just give up. This is certainly better than what the situation has been. There'll be a place closer to the store where they'll be able to park all day long. We'll give it a try and see what happens. And then as far as the Colby students, I mean, I just don't know what law, rule, regulation we could pass that only targets them. I don't think there is one. And so I think that's what we're trying to do. We can do things like say no overnight parking, and which I think is, you know, of course, they're the ones who are most utilizing that. I don't think we could say no overnight parking in the entire concourse because you're going to have trouble from the restaurant and bar owners. And there are other people who live downtown and other places beside the dorm. So, so like I said, hopefully we'll get the parking committee up and going as quickly as possible, and they'll actually be active and come up with some real solutions moving forward. And we'll monitor the changes we've made and see how it goes. And with that, I'm going to take a motion to adjourn.
So moved. So second.
Adjourned.